You ain't worth a dime. If I want, you'll be scrubbing floors alongside the janitors, my husband screamed, using his position to humiliate me. I stayed silent, but the next day, when he walked into accounting to grab a report, he froze when he saw what was lying on the desk. Before we begin, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to know. We hope you enjoy listening to this fascinating story. Zariah Vance sat in the conference room, staring at the documents spread out before her, feeling the tension spreading across her shoulders like a heavy weight. Outside, the October rain drizzled against the glass. Gray droplets slid down the pane, blurring the outlines of the neighboring skyscrapers. The room smelled of fresh brewed coffee and new furniture. The conference room had been refurnished recently. The leadership at Alliance Trade loved to make an impression on clients. Do you even use your head when you draft contracts? Omari's voice sliced through the silence like a knife, sharp, filled with irritation and a specific, performative anger. Zariah looked up. Her husband stood at the opposite end of the table, leaning his hands on the polished surface. Omari Vance, sales director, 38 years old, in a perfectly pressed white dress shirt and a navy blue tie. His hair was faded neatly on the sides, fresh from the barber. An expensive Swiss watch glinted on his wrist, a gift from upper management for exceeding targets last quarter. Omari, I checked everything twice, Zariah said quietly, trying to maintain her composure. The contract is drafted according to the standard template. All clauses were cleared by legal. By the template, he mocked, a sneering tone creeping into his voice. Do you realize that because of your negligence we could lose this client? Mr. Hightower called me personally, furious that the deferred payment terms weren't in the contract. Zariah pursed her lips. The deferred payment terms weren't written in because Omari himself had said in yesterday's briefing that there would be no deferral for this client, upfront payment only. She remembered his words distinctly. She remembered writing them down in her planner. But now, looking at his face, at that demonstrative confidence, Zariah realized arguing was useless. He would find a way to shift the blame onto her regardless. I was acting according to your instructions from yesterday's meeting. She tried to object, but her voice sounded unsure even to herself. My instructions? Omari straightened up and crossed his arms over his chest. What? You taking notes now? Show me. Zariah reached for her planner. But at that moment, the conference room door opened and two colleagues walked in. Eudora from accounting, a heavy-set woman in her 50s with a perpetually tired face, and young Jelani from logistics, who had recently joined the company and still looked at management with poorly concealed awe. Are we on time? Eudora asked cautiously, looking around. We were told the quarterly report meeting was at 10. Yes, come on in, Omari nodded, his face instantly snapping into a professional mask. We were just discussing the quality of work in our department with Zariah, or rather, the lack thereof. Zariah felt the heat rush to her cheeks. He had started this conversation right now on purpose, knowing that others would walk in any minute just to humiliate her in front of witnesses to show his dominance. Eudora and Jelani sat down silently, avoiding eye contact with Zariah. An awkward pause hung in the air, broken only by the sound of rain against the window and the quiet hum of the AC unit. You know, Zariah, Omari continued, a deliberate softness entering his voice that was somehow worse than yelling. Sometimes I think you're just not cut out for this position. Being a client manager means responsibility. It means attention to detail. And you constantly make mistakes. Omari, please, Zariah whispered, feeling herself burning with shame and powerless anger inside. Let's discuss this later. In private. In private? He scoffed. What's so personal about this? Work issues are discussed in a work setting, or do you think your mistakes don't affect the whole department? Jelani stared intently at his laptop, pretending to check urgent emails. Eudora nervously clicked her pen, moving it back and forth over a blank sheet of paper. Do you even understand? Omari swept his gaze over the room, as if calling them as witnesses. That if it weren't for my position, you wouldn't be here anymore? You ain't worth a dime as a specialist. If I wanted, you'd be scrubbing floors alongside the janitors, and you'd be lucky if I kept you on at all." The silence became tangible. Zariah felt her breath catch in her throat. Her husband's words hung in the air, heavy and degrading. Eudora looked up briefly, then quickly looked away. Sympathy flickered on her face, but she said nothing. Jelani swallowed hard and leaned closer to his screen. Zariah slowly closed the folder of documents. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to pick up the papers neatly, not betraying her internal state. A storm was raging inside her. She wanted to scream, throw the folder in his face, run out of the room and slam the door. But she did none of that. "I understand," she said in an even voice, rising from her chair. "I will redo the contract, taking the feedback into account." Omari nodded, already switching his attention to other papers, as if he hadn't just trampled on the dignity of the person he had shared a bed with for the last 12 years. Zariah walked out of the conference room, closing the door firmly behind her. The hallway was empty. Only somewhere at the far end, a printer clicked rhythmically, spitting out another stack of documents. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. Her heart was pounding in her throat, her palms sweating. How had they come to this? Zariah remembered how they met 14 years ago at a corporate mixer for another company where she was working as a secretary, and he was just a regular sales rep. Back then, Omari seemed so charming, attentive, with a good sense of humor, and he knew how to listen. He walked her home after that evening, and they talked until morning, sitting on the stoop of her apartment building. They talked about everything: dreams, plans, what a real family should be like. 6 months later, they got married. The wedding was modest. They just signed the papers at City Hall. They celebrated with parents and a few friends at a small soul food spot downtown. They didn't have much money. They rented a studio apartment on the south side. But to Zariah, it seemed like happiness. Omari would come home from work, and the first thing he'd do was hug her, asking how her day went. On weekends, they walked in the park, went to the movies, planned their future. They couldn't conceive. Doctors threw up their hands, talked about incompatibility, about low probabilities. That became the first crack. Omari withdrew, started spending more time at work. When Zariah tried to bring up adoption, he brushed it off. "Later, not now. Let's get on our feet first." Then came the mortgage. A 2-bedroom condo in a new development, their own place. Finally, Omari got promoted, became a team lead. His salary went up, bonuses started coming in, he began staying at work even later, coming home late, tired and irritable. And then, a year later, the thing happened that changed everything definitively. The company Zariah worked for went bankrupt. She was left without a job. For several months, she couldn't find anything suitable. Money was tight, going only to the mortgage and essentials. Omari started throwing it in her face. "I'm the only one grinding out here, and you're just sitting at home." When she finally found a spot at Alliance Trade, where Omari was already the sales director by then, he took it for granted. "Well, of course. Who else is going to hire you without experience if not me?" And it was true. Zariah was hired largely thanks to her husband's recommendation. At first she was grateful. Finally, a job again, a paycheck, a chance to help with the bills. But very soon she realized that this gratitude had turned into chains. Omari began to use his position. At first it was small things, asking her to stay after work to finish his report since she was free anyway. Then he started giving her the most inconvenient assignments, dealing with problem clients, processing rush documents, all while emphasizing, "If you can't handle it, I won't cover for you. Here, you're just an employee, and I'm your boss." Things changed at home, too. Omari grew colder, more distant. He could spend the entire evening on his phone, answering work emails, not even asking how she was. Intimacy turned into a rare formality once a month, devoid of tenderness or closeness, like fulfilling a marital duty. Zariah tried to talk to him. Several times she initiated serious conversations. "Omari, What's happening to us? We loved each other. He would brush her off. I'm tired, Zariah. Problems at work. You see it. Let's talk later. But later never came. And for the last 6 months, it had become completely unbearable. Omari started openly humiliating her in front of colleagues. He would publicly criticize her work, even if there were no errors. He would force her to redo documents 3 times, nitpicking minor details, and it was always accompanied by hints. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be here. Zariah opened her eyes and looked at her watch. The general briefing would start in 15 minutes. She had to go back. She straightened her blouse, smoothed her hair back into its neat ponytail, and headed to her desk. The office she shared with 3 other managers was at the end of the hall. A bright room with large windows, 4 desks piled high with papers and folders. Motivational posters hung on the walls. Success starts with the first step. The client is always right. Zariah sat at her desk by the window and mechanically turned on her computer. Zariah, you good? Imani asked quietly. She was her colleague, and the only person in this office who could be called a friend. Imani, 32, logistics manager, with long braids and a warm smile, was always ready to support her. I'm fine, Zariah lied, not taking her eyes off the screen. I heard him yelling at you. Imani scooted her chair closer and lowered her voice. That was too much, Z. He has no right to talk to you like that, boss or not. He does, Zariah answered wearily. I really did make a mistake. What mistake? Imani was indignant. I was at the briefing yesterday. He said it himself. No deferral for Hightower. Everyone heard it. Zariah stayed silent. Imani was right, of course, but what was the point of discussing it? Omari would find a way to twist the situation in his favor anyway. He always did. That evening, heading home, Zariah rode the train, watching the darkness of the tunnels flash by outside the window. The car was half empty. Rush hour had passed. She had stayed late fixing that contract. Quiet music played in her earbuds, some old R&B love songs she and Omari used to listen to together back in the day. The apartment greeted her with darkness and silence. Omari wasn't home yet, probably stuck at work again or went to a bar with colleagues. He did that often now, without warning, without asking if she wanted to join. Zariah kicked off her heels in the hallway, went to the kitchen and turned on the kettle. While the water boiled, she stood by the window, looking out at the city night. Lights in the neighboring buildings, sparse cars down on the street, the flickering sign of a 24-hour bodega in the distance. When she got married, she imagined a completely different life. Cozy evenings together, shared plans, support and understanding. Maybe children, at least one child they would love and raise together. But instead, she got a cold, empty apartment and a distant husband who saw her only as a subordinate he could humiliate whenever he felt like it. The kettle clicked off. Zariah mechanically made herself some chamomile tea. It was the only thing that helped calm her nerves even a little. She sat at the kitchen island, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Her phone vibrated, a text from Omari. Running late, don't wait up, short, no explanation, no apology. Zariah didn't even reply. She finished her tea, washed the mug, and went to the bathroom. She stood under the hot shower for a long time, trying to wash off the day. Those words, that humiliation. The water ran down her hair, streaming down her face, mixing with unbidden tears. Later, lying in bed in the dark, Zariah thought over and over about how this couldn't go on, about how every day she was losing herself, turning into a silent shadow afraid to speak up, about how the love had died long ago, if it was ever real, leaving only habit and fear of change. And somewhere deep in her soul, in the darkest corner she was afraid to look into, a thought was taking root, quiet, almost inaudible, but stubborn. The thought that something had to change. If Omari wouldn't or couldn't change it, then she had to. The clock on the nightstand read 11:55 p.m. when Zariah heard the front door open. Omari came in, taking his shoes off loudly in the hallway, then walked into the kitchen. She heard him open the fridge, take something out. A few minutes later, he walked into the bedroom without turning on the light, stripped down, and lay on his side of the bed, turning his back to her. Zariah lay motionless, pretending to sleep, and in that darkness, listening to his breathing, which soon became even and deep, she made a decision. She wouldn't take it anymore. She would find a way. She didn't know exactly what it would be yet, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't live like this, and tomorrow she would start acting. The next morning, Zariah woke up before her alarm. It wasn't light out yet. Only a faint gray streak marked the approach of a new day. Omari was sleeping, sprawled on his side of the bed, snoring lightly. Zariah got up quietly, put on her robe, and went to the kitchen. Turning on the coffee maker, she sat at the table and pulled out her tablet. The decision made in the night hadn't vanished with the first rays of sun. On the contrary, it had become sharper and more defined. If she wanted to change her life, she had to start right now, and she had to start with what she knew best: documents. Zariah had worked at Alliance Trade for 3 years. In that time, she had learned the company from the inside out, understood how all the processes worked, who was responsible for what, and most importantly, she saw how Omari worked. She saw what others didn't see because she was close, because she had access to information, because she was often forced to fix his mistakes and cover up his screw-ups. The coffee was ready. Zariah poured herself a cup, added oat milk, and returned to her tablet. She opened her notes app and started writing down everything she remembered, every instance, every situation where Omari had violated corporate policy or job descriptions. The first thing that came to mind was the story with the European supplier. That was 6 months ago. A contract for office tech supply, a massive order, nearly $500,000. Omari stalled the contract approval for 3 weeks, even though company policy stated all documents had to be signed within 5 business days. Because of this delay, the supplier missed the deadline. The company received the tech late, and a key client, for whom the tech was intended, canceled their contract and went to a competitor. Back then, Omari blamed the legal department, claimed they took too long reviewing the docs. But Zariah knew for a fact the contract had sat on Omari's desk for 2 weeks, simply because he forgot about it. She had run around herself, trying to speed up the process when the director started asking questions. Zariah typed quickly, logging details, dates, sums, company names. Need to find copies of documents confirming the dates. Second instance, falsification of sales reports. This was recent, end of last quarter. The sales target was at risk, and Omari, to show good numbers to leadership, included several deals in the report that hadn't closed yet. Technically, contracts were signed, but payment hadn't been received and goods hadn't shipped. By company rules, such deals shouldn't count in the quarterly report until actual execution. When accounting started the reconciliation, discrepancies popped up. Omari called Zariah in and told her to fix the numbers, hinting she needed to explain the mismatch somehow. She refused to sign the corrected docs, so he signed somewhere by hand himself, faking the approval from accounting. Zariah made another note, forged signature of CFO Eudora Barnes. This is a serious violation. If she could find that document and compare the signature with the original, a handwriting expert could easily prove the forgery. Outside, the sky began to lighten. Zariah glanced at the clock. 6:30 a.m. Omari usually got up at 7, which meant she had another half hour. She continued remembering and typing. The story with the client, Mr. Dubois, who complained about rude treatment and poor service. Omari simply deleted his email from the corporate server, never forwarding the complaint to the claims department as required by protocol. Dubois ended up writing a scathing review on an independent portal, damaging the company's reputation. Then there was the situation with kickbacks. Zariah didn't have direct proof, but she had heard Omari's strange phone conversations with supplier reps several times. Phrases like, "The percentage remains the same," and "transfer to the same account" sounded more than suspicious. The company strictly forbade employees from receiving any gratuities from partners. That was considered corruption and led to immediate termination. Proving this would be harder, but she could try to find vendor selection documents, analyze if purchase prices were inflated, if contracts were signed with firms offering less favorable terms. Zariah heard Omari's alarm go off in the bedroom. She quickly saved the notes, closed the tablet, and stood up, pretending to make breakfast. Omari walked out of the bedroom about 10 minutes later, rumpled, sleep-deprived, in just his boxers and undershirt. He walked into the bathroom without saying a word. Zariah heard him brushing his teeth, turning on the shower. Then he returned to the kitchen, dressed in fresh slacks and a crisp shirt, his hair damp. "Coffee?" he grunted, sitting at the table. "It's ready." Zariah poured him a cup and set it in front of him. "Want toast?" "Sure." They ate breakfast in silence. Omari scrolled through his phone, answering messages. Zariah pretended to read news on her tablet, but in reality, she was strategizing. She needed access to documents, the ones stored in the company's digital archive, and the hard copies sitting in the safe in Omari's office. The digital archive wasn't a problem. She had work access to many folders. But the safe, you couldn't just walk into that. Although Zariah remembered that Omari never changed the code on the safe. She knew it. 0915, his mother's birthday. He used that combination everywhere. On his phone, bank cards, all his locks, purely out of laziness to memorize different passwords. She had to wait for a moment when Omari left his office for a long enough time. Management briefing, off-site client meeting, lunch, something like that. Then she could go in, open the safe, and photograph the necessary documents. "I'm out." Omari stood up, finishing his coffee, grabbed his jacket and briefcase. At the door, he turned back. "And by the way, that contract with Hightower, did you redo it?" "Yes," Zariah answered. "Sent it to him last night for approval." "Well, watch it. If you screw up again, I'm firing you with cause. Tired of covering for you." He walked out, slamming the door. Zariah sat at the table, clutching her cold cup of coffee. Tired of covering for you. As if she was the one constantly messing up, not him. As if she was the one forging documents and hiding client complaints. She put the cup in the sink, gathered her things, and left the house too. On the way to work, sitting on the bus, Zariah continued thinking through the details. She had to act carefully and methodically, collect all evidence, organize it, prepare a full dossier, and only then hand it over to the right person. Who exactly? The director or straight to internal affairs? The company had a security department that handled violation checks, probably better there. As professionals, they could properly evaluate the info and conduct an investigation. Alliance Trade's office was in a business center downtown, not far from the subway station. A large modern building of glass and concrete, with a spacious lobby and strict security at the entrance. Zariah passed through the turnstile, took the elevator to the 6th floor. The workday started as usual. Morning stand-up at 9, then tackling current tasks. Omari led the meeting, confident and pushy as always, barking out orders. Zariah sat and took notes, trying not to draw attention to herself. When the meeting ended and everyone dispersed, Zariah went back to her desk and logged into her computer. First thing, she accessed the corporate digital archive. The file storage system was organized by department and date. She had access to her department's folders, as well as general documents, contracts, reports, memos. Zariah opened the folder with quarterly reports for the last 6 months, found the specific report where Omari had included the unclosed deals. The document was signed digitally, but attached was an email with approval from accounting. Zariah opened the attachment. There was a scan of Eudora's handwritten signature. She saved the file to a flash drive, then opened several other documents with the CFO's real signatures for comparison. The difference was noticeable even to the naked eye. The forged signature looked angular, unsure, while the real one was fluid, with a characteristic loop at the end. Next step, find the documents for the European supplier contract. Zariah spent over an hour digging through the archive until she found the right folder. It had all the correspondence, initial request from the supplier, draft contract, approvals from different departments, and most importantly, dates. The system clearly showed the contract landed on Omari's desk for signature on March 21st, and he signed it only on April 9th, 19 days instead of the mandated 5. Zariah copied the entire folder. Then she found a memo from the director demanding an explanation for the delay, and Omari's reply blaming legal. Beside it, the response memo from the head of legal proving their department cleared the contract in 2 days, and the bottleneck was strictly at the signing stage with Omari. These were already serious receipts. Zariah felt confidence growing inside her. She was on the right track. At lunch, when most employees scattered to the cafeteria or the pizza spot across the street, Zariah stayed at her desk. Imani peeked in. "Z, let's go grab lunch. I want to hit that taco spot." "Thanks, Imani. I'll go later. Gotta finish this urgent report." "All right. Want me to bring you something?" "No, I'm good. I'll grab something later." Imani left. Zariah waited for the hallway to empty, then headed to Omari's office. The door was closed but not locked. He rarely locked his office during the workday, considering it an unnecessary precaution. Zariah looked around. No one. She quickly slipped inside and closed the door behind her. Her heart pounded so loud it seemed audible in the hallway. Her hands shook slightly. Omari's office was spacious and well-furnished. Large mahogany desk, leather chair, bookshelves along the wall lined with binders and a few company awards. His diploma and certificates from various sales trainings hung on the wall. The safe was in the corner behind the chair, a small metal cabinet with a keypad. Zariah walked up to it, punched in the code, 0915, click. The safe opened. Inside lay folders of documents, a few envelopes, a flash drive. Zariah started flipping through the folders quickly. One contained contracts with vendors, the ones she suspected Omari was getting kickbacks from. She pulled out her phone and started photographing the pages, trying to be quiet. In another folder was client correspondence. Zariah flipped through. There was the email from Mr. Dubois with the complaint, an official grievance on company letterhead with date and signature. This letter should have been logged with claims and passed on for review, but Omari had just hidden it in the safe. Zariah photographed that too. Her hands shook harder, from fear, from adrenaline, from the realization that she was doing something forbidden but necessary. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Zariah froze, listening. The steps were getting closer. She quickly closed the folder, shoved it back in the safe, slammed the door, and spun the lock handle. Click. Locked. The steps stopped right at the office door. Zariah went cold. If someone walked in right now and caught her... The door opened a crack. A security guard, an older man in a uniform jacket, appeared in the doorway. "Oh, it's you, Mrs. Vance." He sighed in relief. Thought some stranger walked in. "Is Mr. Vance in?" "No, he's in a client meeting." Zariah answered as calmly as possible, though inside she was a ball of ice. "I brought some documents, left them on the desk. He asked me to." "Got it." "All right. Sorry to disturb you." The guard closed the door. Zariah exhaled and leaned against the edge of the desk. Her knees were weak, cold sweat running down her back. She had to leave immediately. She walked out of the office, trying to walk calmly and confidently as if she really had just dropped off papers. The hallway was empty. Zariah returned to her desk, sat at her computer, and pretended to work. But focusing was impossible. Everything inside was still vibrating from the scare. A split second, and she would have been busted. What would she have said? What explanation could she invent? But now she had several more crucial pieces of evidence. She needed to transfer the photos from her phone to the computer and save them somewhere safe. That evening, back home, Zariah organized everything she had gathered. She created a password-protected folder on her personal laptop. She sorted documents by category: deadline violations, document forgery, concealment of complaints, corruption suspicions. To each point, she attached copies of docs, screenshots from the digital archive, photos. Everything was dated and labeled. When the violation occurred, who was involved, what consequences it had for the company. The work took several hours. Omari came home late, detained somewhere unknown again. Zariah was already in bed with a book when he appeared in the bedroom. "What you been up to?" he asked, undressing. "Reading." Zariah lifted the book, showing the cover. "Mm-hmm." Omari fell onto the bed and was snoring within a minute. Zariah put the book down and turned off the light. In the dark, she lay with her eyes open for a long time, running the next steps of the plan through her head. The next few days passed in a tense search for info. Zariah tried to act unnoticeable, fishing necessary docs out of the archive bit by bit, copying emails, saving files, taking screenshots. She found another egregious case, the tender story for equipment supply. Omari had chosen a company that offered a price 15% higher than competitors. Officially, he justified it by better quality and reliability. But Zariah found an email in his correspondence from a rep of that company thanking him for his assistance and promising to wire the agreed sum to the designated account. This was direct proof of corruption. If she handed this to leadership along with the other materials, Omari couldn't wiggle out of it. Zariah copied the entire email chain, then found the tender docs. All bids, price comparison tables, the justification for the winner. Together, it painted a complete picture of the violation. By the end of the week, she had a solid dossier of evidence. Over 50 documents, contracts, letters, reports, memos, screenshots, chats. Everything was neatly organized. Each document had a brief description of the violation. There was one last step: decide exactly who to give these materials to. Zariah thought about it for days. The company director, Reginald Sterling, was a strict and fair man, but she wasn't sure he would objectively review a complaint against one of his top sales guys. Omari really did bring the company good profit, and leadership valued that. The internal control department seemed a more reliable option. People worked there whose direct job was uncovering violations and abuses. They didn't depend on sympathies or personal relationships. They were guided only by regulations and facts. Zariah found the contacts for internal control on the corporate intranet. The department head was a man named Langston Cole. Zariah knew little about him, saw him in the hallway a couple of times. A lean, fit man in his 40s, always in a sharp suit, with an inscrutable face. She could write him an official memo attaching all materials. But Zariah feared the email might be intercepted, or she'd be identified by digital signature prematurely. Omari would find out, and then he'd do everything to get ahead of her, destroy compromising docs, invent explanations, shift the blame to someone else. No, she had to act decisively. Hand it over in person, with a guarantee that the materials would land exactly where they needed to and be reviewed without delay. On Friday evening, when Omari went to some mixer and wasn't due back until late, Zariah printed all the documents. The printer whirred for a long time, spitting page after page. It resulted in a thick stack, over 100 sheets. She put everything in a separate binder, wrote on the cover page, "Materials regarding official violations by Sales Director O. Vance," and dated it. The binder went onto a shelf in the closet behind a stack of old magazines. No one would accidentally find it there. But at any moment, when Zariah made the final decision, she could grab that binder and deliver it. Over the weekend, Zariah felt strange, simultaneously calm and anxious. On one hand, she finally had a plan, evidence, a way to change the situation. On the other, she understood that once she took the final step, there would be no turning back. It would destroy her marriage completely. It would lead to Omari's firing. It would upend their whole lives. But wasn't that what she wanted? Was the life they had now worth saving? Sunday evening, as they sat in the kitchen eating dinner, silently as usual, each buried in their phone, Omari suddenly looked up at Zariah. "You acting weird lately." Zariah flinched. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Thoughtful or something? Problems at work?" He didn't even realize how absurd that question sounded. Problems at work. He was the main problem. "No, everything's fine," Zariah answered. "Just a little tired." "Well, take a break then. A vacation. Why don't you go somewhere? You got unused days." "Yeah, maybe." They returned to their phones. The conversation ended without really starting, just like everything between them in recent years. But now Zariah knew. Soon everything would change. Very soon. Monday morning, Zariah woke up with steel resolve. Enough gathering evidence, enough delaying. Today she would hand the materials to internal control. She dressed with particular care, a sharp navy pantsuit, white blouse, hair in a sleek bun. She wanted to look serious and professional. Omari, as usual, paid her almost no attention. He ate breakfast in a rush and left, tossing over his shoulder. Meeting with vendors till lunch, then briefing with the director. I'll be back late. Perfect. He definitely wouldn't be in the office before noon. Zariah took the binder from the closet, put it in her tote bag, and left the house. On the way, her heart beat fast, palms sweaty. She realized she was about to cross a line after which nothing could be restored. She got to the office earlier than usual, around 8:30. At 9 sharp, she dialed Internal Control's extension. A woman picked up. Internal Control, speaking. Hello, my name is Zariah Vance, sales manager. I need to meet with Mr. Langston Cole regarding an urgent matter. Regarding what exactly? It concerns official violations in our department. I have documents. Pause. Can you come by today at 11? Office 803, 8th floor. Yes, thank you. Those 2 hours dragged painfully slow. Zariah tried to work, but her thoughts kept returning to the upcoming conversation. At 10 till 11, she grabbed her bag and went up to the 8th floor. The office was at the end of the hall. Nameplate on the door. Internal Control Deptol Head L. Cole. Zariah knocked. Come in. Behind the desk sat Langston Cole, a fit black man around 45, short haircut with touches of gray, attentive eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. Hello, have a seat. Mrs. Vance, correct? Yes. Zariah sat down. Thank you for seeing me. I was told this is about violations in sales. Tell me more. Zariah swallowed. I've been working in sales for 3 years. My supervisor is Omari Vance, the director. In that time, I have witnessed numerous violations on his part. Non-compliance with corporate procedures, document falsification, concealing client complaints, potentially accepting kickbacks from vendors. Cole listened intently. Can you confirm this with documentation? Yes. Zariah pulled out the binder and placed it on the desk. All materials are here. Copies, emails, reports, memos. Everything is systematized. Cole took the binder and started flipping through, scanned the pages, lingered on some. His eyebrows raised slightly. Serious accusations, he murmured, and a very detailed collection. How long have you been gathering this? About 2 weeks, but many violations I observed over 2 years. Cole set the binder aside and looked her in the eyes. You understand the gravity of the situation? If these allegations are confirmed, Mr. Vance will be terminated. Legal measures may be taken against him. I understand. You will have to give an official statement. Your name will be in the investigation files. This is not an anonymous tip. I'm ready. Cole picked up the binder again and studied the contents for a few minutes, making notes. Finally, he closed it and leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Vance, I have to ask. Omari Vance, is he a relative? Zariah froze. Yes, she said quietly. He is my husband. I see. Cole's face betrayed nothing. You could be accused of personal revenge, trying to settle scores due to domestic issues. I understand. Zariah straightened her spine. But that doesn't change the facts. The documents are real. The violations are real. Everything can be verified and proven. Cole looked at her for a few seconds, then nodded. All right, I will initiate an official inquiry. Within a week, we will review the materials, conduct handwriting analysis, interview witnesses. I will inform you personally about the progress. I ask you to maintain confidentiality. Do not tell anyone you came here. Okay, thank you. Zariah walked out of the office. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and inhaled deeply. It was done. Documents handed over, the investigation would start. She returned to her department. Imani waved. Z, where you been? Omari was looking for you. Called like 3 times. Her heart dropped. What did he want? I don't know, he said, call him back. Zariah dialed his number. Where were you? I've been calling for half an hour. Sorry, was in a meeting. Phone on silent. What happened? Need the client report for the East Coast region for Q3. Urgent. Director asked for it for the briefing. Okay, I'll prep it now. Faster. Briefing is at 1. He hung up. Zariah sat down to work. Had to act normal, show nothing had changed. The day dragged. In the evening, a message came to her work email. Inquiry started. Handwriting analysis tomorrow morning. Witness interviews after lunch. LC. So, tomorrow. Omari got home at 10, tired, irritable. Briefing ran long, he grumbled, then argued with legal for 3 hours about wording in a contract. Hungry? Yeah, whatever. She heated up soup and leftovers. Omari ate in silence, staring at his phone. Zariah watched him and felt only emptiness. No pity, just cold calm. She couldn't sleep for a long time that night, thinking about what would happen tomorrow. The analysis would confirm the forgery, and then everything would roll fast. Tuesday morning, Zariah got up before her alarm. Omari was sleepy and uncommunicative. He left first. Zariah got to work by 9, worked on autopilot. Her mind was occupied with waiting. At 10:30, 2 men in suits walked into the department. One was Langston Cole, the second a stranger holding a folder. Is Mr. Vance in? Cole asked Eudora. Yes, in his office. They walked to Omari's door, closed it. Tense silence fell over the office. Everyone exchanged glances, whispering. Zariah pretended to be busy, but her heart hammered. A few minutes later, the door flew open. Omari walked out, pale, face twitching. Cole followed. This is a misunderstanding. Omari's voice was loud, cracking. I demand an explanation. On what grounds? On the grounds of an internal investigation, Cole replied evenly. Let's proceed to the conference room. They walked past the desks. Omari looked around. His eyes lingered on Zariah for a second, but she kept her face buried in her monitor. The conference room door closed. Whispers erupted in the department. What happened? Some investigation. Did you hear? Document falsification. Imani rolled her chair over to Zariah. You know anything? No idea. An hour passed, then another 30 minutes. Other people went in, head of legal, CFO Eudora Barnes. Finally, the door opened. Omari walked out, face gray, lips pressed tight. He walked to his office without looking around. Cole stopped at the entrance to the department floor. Good afternoon, everyone. Due to an internal investigation, Omari Vance has been temporarily suspended from his duties. Dante Rivers is appointed acting director. Please continue work as usual. He left. Silence hung in the room. Then it exploded. Suspended. For what? What did he do? Zariah sat motionless. A strange sensation inside, between relief and fear. It had begun. The process was launched. A few minutes later, Omari walked out with a box, packing personal items. Face like stone, but eyes shooting lightning. Walking past, he stopped at Zariah's desk, looked down at her, and hissed quietly, It was you. I know it was you. Zariah looked up. I don't know what you're talking about. You know exactly. Icy rage. You're gonna regret this. I swear you'll regret it. Mr. Vance, Cole's voice called out. Let's go. Omari threw one last hate-filled look at Zariah and headed for the exit. The whole department watched him go in silence. When he disappeared, a storm of discussion broke out. Zariah got up and went to the restroom to be alone, locked herself in a stall, leaned against the wall, hands shaking. A mix of emotions boiled inside, triumph, fear, relief, shame. Phone vibrated. Thank you for cooperation. Analysis confirmed signature forgery. Other violations documented. Commission meeting in 3 days. LC, expert analysis confirmed it. She was right. Zariah washed her face with cold water, looked in the mirror. Pale face, tense features, but determination in her eyes. Returning, she sat down to work. Had to keep it together. Imani tried to fish for details, but Zariah answered evasively. I don't know. They say issues with documents. The day ended. Zariah went home earlier than usual. At home, she sat in the kitchen for a long time, drinking tea. Omari hadn't shown up yet. Where was he? What was he doing? He returned late at night. Zariah was already in bed. Heard him walk into the kitchen, open the fridge, then heavy steps to the bedroom. He walked in, flipped on the light. Zariah shielded her eyes. Turn it off, please. No. Voice hard. We need to talk. Zariah sat up. Omari stood in the middle of the room in his jacket, face red, eyes bloodshot. Evidently he'd been drinking. You gave them the documents. It was a statement. You gathered dirt on me and snitched to internal control. Zariah stayed silent. Answer me, he barked. Was it you? Yes, quiet but firm. It was me. He swayed, as if hit physically, stood silent for a few seconds, then took a step forward. Do you realize what you've done? You destroyed me. I'm going to get fired, probably facing criminal charges, because of you. Not because of me. Zariah kept her voice steady. Because of you. Because of what you did. Forging documents, taking kickbacks, deceiving the company. Everybody does that. Omari waved his hand. It's standard practice. All managers get their cut. Everybody adjusts numbers. Maybe, but that doesn't make it right. Right. He laughed bitterly. You gonna lecture me on right? You, who betrayed your own husband? I didn't betray you. Zariah stood up, pulling on her robe. I just stopped covering for your violations, stopped staying silent when you humiliate me and others, stopped being an accomplice. Accomplice? He mocked. Big words. In reality, you're just getting revenge because I yelled at you at work. No. Zariah shook her head. I'm doing this because I'm tired of living in fear. Because I don't want to tolerate your disrespect anymore. Because I realized you will never change. Omari looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, then abruptly turned and walked out, slamming the door. Zariah heard him crash onto the sofa in the living room. Then silence. She lay back down but couldn't sleep. Tomorrow was a new day, and in 3 days, the commission that would decide Omari's fate once and for all. 3 days later, the commission meeting took place. Zariah was called as a witness. She gave statements, answered questions, confirmed the authenticity of documents. The next day, Langston Cole called her. Mrs. Vance, the commission has reached a decision. Omari Vance is terminated for cause, violation of corporate policy and code of conduct. Materials have been handed over to law enforcement to decide on pressing criminal charges. Thank you for letting me know, Zariah answered quietly. That same evening, she came home to find Omari packing. He was silently folding clothes into a suitcase. I'm moving out, he said without looking at her. To a hotel until I find another apartment. Okay. You got what you wanted. I'm fired. I'm jobless. Hope you sleep better now. Zariah stood in the bedroom doorway looking at him. I don't sleep better, Omari. I just don't sleep scared anymore. He raised his head, looked at her. There was something like understanding in his eyes, but he said nothing, closed the suitcase, grabbed his jacket, and walked out of the apartment. The door closed. Zariah remained standing in the silence. 12 years of marriage ended. Just like that, without screaming, without a brawl. He left, and the apartment felt empty. She went to the kitchen, put on the kettle, sat at the table, and suddenly felt tears rolling down her cheeks. Not from pity for him, not from regret, but from relief, from the fact that it was finally over. The day after Omari left, Zariah woke up in an empty apartment. The silence was unusual. Even his snoring, which had annoyed her so much in recent years, was gone. She got up, made coffee, and sat by the window looking at the gray November morning. Formalities had to be settled. Divorce, division of assets. Zaraya realized Omari was unlikely to fight. After the firing and potential criminal case, he wasn't in a position to battle for the condo. A week later, she filed for divorce. Omari agreed without objection. At the court hearing, they sat on opposite sides of the room, not looking at each other. The process took 20 minutes. The judge asked about reasons, children, assets. Asset disputes settled, the judge clarified. Yes, Zaraya answered. The apartment stays with me. I am paying out the former spouse for his share. Omari nodded, confirming. He looked gaunt, aged. He was wearing an old sweater and jeans, no expensive suits or watches. Decree. Marriage between Zaraya Vance and Omari Vance is dissolved. They walked out of the courtroom simultaneously. In the hallway, Omari stopped, turned to her. You happy now? Zaraya looked at him calmly. I didn't want to destroy you, Omari. I just wanted you to stop destroying me. He wanted to say something but stayed silent, turned and walked toward the exit. Zaraya watched him go. That was the last time she saw him as a husband. Now he was just a person from the past. At work, the atmosphere gradually changed. The new department head, Dante Rivers, turned out to be a calm professional who didn't yell at subordinates or humiliate them in front of colleagues. Work became lighter, freer. Colleagues, of course, knew Zaraya was Omari's wife. Reactions varied. Some sympathized, some judged in whispers behind her back. Imani asked directly one day, Z, is it true you handed him to internal control? Zaraya thought about whether to lie, but decided to be honest. Yes, it was me. I gathered proof of his violations and gave it to leadership. Imani whistled. Damn, that's a twist. But you know what? Good for you. He deserved it. Remember how he screamed at Lena from accounting last year? She was out sick for 2 weeks after that. Nerve shot. I didn't want revenge, Zaraya said quietly. I just couldn't stay silent anymore. And you were right. Sometimes silence is also complicity. Those words stuck in her soul. Zaraya thought about them often afterward. Silence as complicity. How many years had she been silent? How long had she covered his mistakes, fixed his documents, tolerated humiliation? And all that time she thought she was doing the right thing, saving the family, but in reality, she was just afraid of change. A month after the divorce, CEO Reginald Sterling called Zaraya to his office. She was nervous, worried they decided to fire her as an inconvenient witness, but the director greeted her warmly. Mrs. Vance, have a seat. I wanted to thank you, personally. What you did required considerable courage. Thanks to you, we identified serious violations and prevented further losses for the company. Zaraya stayed silent, not knowing what to say. I know it wasn't easy, given your relationship with Vance, the director continued, but you put the company's interests and integrity above personal ties. That is worthy of respect. Therefore, I have decided to promote you. Starting next month, you are senior manager with a 30% salary increase. Zaraya was stunned. Thank you. I didn't expect that. You earned it. Mr. Rivers speaks highly of your work, and colleagues, too. Keep it up. Walking out of the office, Zaraya felt a strange feeling. For the first time in years, she was valued not as the boss's wife, not as someone hired through connections, but as a professional, for her own merit. The raise allowed her to breathe easier. She paid Omari the compensation for his share of the condo by taking a loan, but now she could cover it without issues. She did a little renovation in the bedroom, put up new wallpaper, bought new bedding. Wanted to erase traces of the past life. Evenings, she was often alone. Read books she had put off for a long time, watched movies, signed up for yoga, something she thought about for years, but Omari always said was stupid and a waste of money. Imani sometimes invited her to girls' nights, movies, brunch. Gradually, Zaria started reconnecting with people she had lost during the marriage. Turned out many were happy to restore the bond. "You know, Z," an old friend, Tasha, whom she hadn't seen in 5 years, said one day, "you've changed. You became more alive somehow. Before you were always so tight, tense." "Really?" Zaria was surprised. "Yeah, like you were constantly walking on eggshells. Now you're more relaxed. Divorce was good for you." Zaria thought about it. Maybe it was true. She no longer woke up with anxiety, didn't fear saying the wrong thing, didn't weigh every word, lived for herself, not for someone's approval. 6 months passed. Spring replaced winter. The city turned green. Zaria was walking home from work through the park and suddenly saw a familiar figure on a bench, Omari. He sat hunched over in an old jacket, staring at his phone. She wanted to walk past unnoticed, but he looked up and saw her. For a few seconds they looked at each other. Then Omari stood up. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Awkward pause. "How are things?" he asked. "Good. You?" He shrugged. "Found a job. Manager at a small firm. Pay is whatever, but what can you do? With my reputation, you don't get to be picky." "I see." Another pause. Omari looked lost, aged. Zaria felt a pang of pity, but not regret. "I wanted to say..." He cleared his throat. "You were probably right. I acted like, both at work and with you. Took all this to realize." Zaria stayed silent. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I know it's too late. But I want you to know I get it now. Too late, but you got it." "I'm glad you realized that, Omari," Zaria said quietly. "Sincerely glad. Hope you won't treat people like that anymore." "I'll try." They stood a little longer in silence. Then Zaria nodded. "Good luck to you." "You too." She walked on, turned back after a few yards. Omari was still standing there, watching her go. She waved and turned the corner. That was their last meeting. Zaria walked home thinking about how strangely life works out. A year ago, she couldn't imagine she would dare to do what she did. And now she had a new life. Not ideal, of course. Sometimes it was lonely, sometimes melancholy hit, but it was her life, built on her terms. At home, she made dinner, turned on some music, sat by the window with a cup of tea. The sun was setting, painting the sky in pink and gold tones. The city hummed with its usual evening noise. A few weeks later, a new client appeared at work, Isaiah, owner of a small construction company. They crossed paths several times on work issues. He was pleasant to talk to, had a good sense of humor, attentive. One day, after another meeting, he lingered. "Zaria, can I buy you a coffee? Not for work, just because." Zaria hesitated. "I don't know. I recently got divorced. I'm not asking for your hand in marriage," he smiled. "Just coffee. 2 people. Pleasant conversation. No obligations." Zaria thought for a few seconds and nodded. "Okay, just coffee." They went to a coffee shop across the street, sat by the window, talked about work, life, books. Isaiah turned out to be well-read and interesting. Time flew by unnoticed. "I had a really nice time," he said, saying goodbye. "Maybe do it again sometime?" "Maybe," Zaria smiled. She didn't promise herself anything, didn't build plans, didn't fantasize about a new relationship, just allowed herself to be open to possibilities. That evening, sitting at home, she remembered words she had once read. "Respect cannot be returned once it is lost. You can only start over with someone who deserves it." Omari lost her respect many years ago, and no apologies, no promises to change could bring it back, because respect isn't a one-time act. It's a constant practice, a daily choice to see dignity in another person. Zaria stood up, walked to the window. The city glowed with lights. Somewhere out there was Omari, building his new life. Somewhere was Isaiah, possibly thinking about today's meeting. Somewhere were millions of other people, each with their stories, joys, pain. And here was she, Zaria Vance, 38 years old, divorced, senior manager, living alone in a 2-bedroom condo, and, for the first time in years, free. Free from fear, from the need to justify herself, from others' expectations, from toxic relationships. She smiled at her reflection in the dark glass. Tomorrow would be a new day, a new week, a new chapter of life, and she was ready to write it herself, with her own hand, her own words. No love is worth humiliation. No relationship is worth losing yourself. That was the main lesson she took from everything that happened, and she would never forget it. Zaria turned off the light in the room, leaving only a small lamp on the table. Sat in the armchair with a book she started reading a week ago, opened to the bookmark, and immersed herself in reading. Outside the window, the city hummed, spring living its own life. Somewhere music played from open windows of neighboring buildings. And she was here, in her apartment, in her space, in her new life. And she felt good. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.